The stagecoach door swung open with such force that the wind nearly tore it from its hinges, revealing a woman wrapped in layers of wool and silk that did nothing against the Montana winter, howling through fluorescent like a living beast. Clara Northfield stepped down onto frozen ground, her boots immediately sinking into snow that had accumulated faster than anyone could shovel, and she wondered if accepting a marriage proposal from a man she had never met was the worst decision of her 22 years or simply the most desperate. "Madam, you need to get inside," the driver shouted over the wind, his face red and chapped. "This blizzard is getting worse by the minute. Your husband-to-be, Josiah Miller, he was supposed to meet you, but I do not see him anywhere." Clara clutched her single carpet bag tighter, her fingers already numb inside her gloves. The main street of fluorescent stretched before her, or what she could see of it through the white curtain of snow. Buildings lined both sides, their windows glowing with lamplight that looked impossibly warm and distant. She had traveled from Philadelphia for 3 weeks, enduring cramped train cars and uncomfortable stage stops, all to meet a man who had written her letters full of promises about a good life in Montana territory. The year was 1883, and women like Clara had few options when their families fell on hard times. Her father's death 2 years prior had left her mother and 3 younger sisters dependent on her meager wages as a seamstress. When Josiah's letter arrived through the mail-order bride agency, offering marriage and financial support for her family, she had accepted before allowing herself time to reconsider. "I will wait in the general store," Clara said, nodding toward the nearest building with a painted sign that read Morrison's Dry Goods. The driver helped her with her bag, practically pushing her through the snow toward the storefront. Her skirts were soaked within seconds, the heavy fabric dragging at her legs. By the time she reached the door, she could barely feel her feet. She stumbled inside and blessed warmth hit her face like a physical thing. "Lord have mercy, shut that door," an older woman behind the counter called out. "You are letting in all the cold." Clara pushed the door closed with her shoulder, leaning against it as she caught her breath. The store was cramped and cluttered, every inch of space filled with goods from flour sacks to horse tack. 3 other people occupied the space, a middle-aged couple examining fabric and a man in his late 20s standing near the pot-bellied stove in the center of the room. "I am looking for Josiah Miller," Clara said once she could speak without her teeth chattering. "I was supposed to meet him." "I am Clara Northfield, his intended." The woman behind the counter exchanged glances with the couple, and something passed between them that made Clara's stomach drop. "You had better sit down, dear," the woman said, coming around the counter. "I am Mrs. Morrison, and I am afraid I have some difficult news." Clara felt the blood drain from her face. "Is he hurt? Is he delayed?" "Josiah Miller died 3 days ago," the man by the stove said, his voice deep and matter-of-fact. "Got thrown from his horse and broke his neck." "I am sorry you came all this way for nothing." The words hit Clara like a physical blow. She swayed on her feet, and Mrs. Morrison grabbed her arm to steady her. "Owen Lancaster, have some compassion," Mrs. Morrison scolded. "Can you not see the poor girl is in shock?" Owen stepped forward, and Clara got her first good look at him. He was tall and lean, with dark brown hair that needed cutting and green eyes that seemed to assess everything they looked at. His jaw was covered in several days' worth of stubble, and his clothes were those of a working rancher, practical and worn but clean. There was something solid about him, something that spoke of capability and strength without arrogance. "I apologize," Owen said, and his tone did soften slightly. "That was too blunt. But the fact remains that you are stranded here, and this blizzard is only getting worse. Do you have money for a room at the boarding house?" Clara's mind raced. She had exactly $7 to her name, money she had scraped together for emergencies. The journey west had depleted nearly everything she had saved. Her return ticket was contingent on Josiah purchasing it, part of their agreement. Without him, she was trapped. "I have some money," she said carefully, not wanting to reveal just how precarious her situation was. "The boarding house is full anyway," Mrs. Morrison said. "We have 3 families stranded here by the storm, and old Mrs. Henderson took in as many as she could fit. There is not a spare bed in town." "She cannot stay here," Mr. Morrison said from across the store. "We do not have the room, and it would not be proper anyway." Clara felt panic rising in her chest. She was alone in a strange town, with barely any money, no place to stay, and a blizzard raging outside that showed no signs of stopping. The warmth of the store suddenly felt suffocating rather than comforting. "I will take her to my ranch," Owen said. Everyone in the store turned to stare at him. "Owen Lancaster, that is highly inappropriate," Mrs. Morrison said, her voice sharp with disapproval. "It is also the only option," Owen replied. "My ranch is only 2 miles outside of town. I have a spare room and my housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, lives there as well, so there will be a proper chaperone. The lady cannot freeze to death in the street because we are worried about propriety." "Mrs. Chen left yesterday morning to visit her daughter in Helena," Mr. Morrison pointed out. "You told me so yourself." Owen's jaw tightened. "Then I will sleep in the barn, but I am not leaving her here with nowhere to go. Look at her, she is about to collapse." Clara wanted to protest, to insist she could take care of herself, but the truth was she felt light-headed and her legs were shaking. The warmth of the store after the bitter cold outside had made her realize just how exhausted she was. 3 weeks of travel, little sleep, and now this shock had pushed her to her limits. "I cannot impose," she managed to say. "You are not imposing," Owen said firmly. "I am offering. We need to leave now, though, before the storm gets any worse. I can barely see my hand in front of my face out there as it is." Mrs. Morrison looked at Clara with concern. "It might be your best option, dear. Owen Lancaster is a good man, been ranching here for 7 years since he came west from Ohio. He is a bit rough around the edges, but he is honorable. And if you stay here, I do not know what will become of you." Clara made a decision born of necessity and exhaustion. "I accept your offer, Mr. Lancaster, and I thank you for your kindness." Owen nodded once, a sharp, decisive movement. "Get whatever you need from your bag for the night. We need to travel light and fast." 10 minutes later, Clara found herself bundled into a heavy coat that Owen had insisted she borrow from the store, which he paid for over her protests, and she was being helped onto a massive horse that stamped impatiently in the snow. Owen swung up behind her, his arms coming around her to grip the reins, and she felt the solid warmth of his chest against her back. "Hold on tight," he said close to her ear. "The wind is going to try to knock us over." The moment they left the shelter of the buildings, Clara understood what he meant. The wind screamed across the open land, driving snow into her face hard enough to sting even through the scarf Owen had wrapped around her head. She could not see anything beyond a few feet in any direction. The world had become nothing but white and cold and the powerful movement of the horse beneath them. Owen guided the horse with confidence, his body a wall of warmth at her back. Clara found herself leaning into him without thinking, seeking any shelter from the brutal wind. Her fingers gripped the saddle horn until they ached, and she tried not to think about how easy it would be to become lost in this whiteout, to wander until the cold claimed them both. The ride felt like it lasted hours, though it was probably only 30 minutes. By the time Owen pulled the horse to a stop, Clara could not feel her face. She heard him dismount, felt his hands on her waist, and then she was being lifted down. Her legs nearly gave out when her feet hit the ground. "I've got you," Owen said, his arm around her waist. "Just a few more steps." He guided her forward, and suddenly they were out of the wind, inside a barn that smelled of hay and horses and leather. The relief was so intense that Clara actually sobbed once before she could control herself. "Stay here," Owen ordered, settling her onto a bale of hay. "I need to take care of Thunder." Clara watched through a haze of exhaustion as Owen unsaddled the big gray horse with efficient movements, rubbing the animal down and giving him feed and water. Her mind felt slow and fuzzy. She should offer to help, should do something other than sit here uselessly, but she could not seem to make her body respond to her thoughts. "Come on," Owen said, returning to her side. "The house is just across the yard. Can you walk?" "Yes," Clara said, though she was not sure it was true. She made it 3 steps into the blizzard before her legs gave out. Owen caught her before she hit the ground, and then she was being lifted into his arms like she weighed nothing at all. "I am sorry," she tried to say, but the words came out slurred. "Stop apologizing," Owen said. "You have been traveling for weeks and just had the worst shock of your life. No one expects you to be strong right now." He carried her across the yard, kicking open a door and bringing her into a kitchen that was blessedly warm. A fire burned in the large stove, and Owen must have banked it before he left for town. He carried her through the kitchen into a main room with a massive stone fireplace, where another fire burned low. He set her in a chair close to the flames and immediately began removing her wet outer layers. "We need to get you warm," he said, his hands quick and impersonal as he unwound the frozen scarf from her head. "Frostbite is a real danger. Can you wiggle your fingers and toes?" Clara tried. Her fingers moved sluggishly, but she could feel them. Her toes were another matter. "I cannot feel my feet." Owen muttered something under his breath that might have been a curse. He disappeared and returned a moment later with an armful of blankets and what looked like dry clothes. "Your boots are frozen solid. I am going to have to remove them. It might hurt." "Do what you need to do," Clara said. It did hurt. The leather had frozen stiff, and Owen had to work carefully to get her boots and stockings off without damaging her skin. Once her feet were bare, he wrapped them in soft flannel, and then covered her entire body with layers of quilts. "I am going to make coffee and heat up some stew," he said. "Do not fall asleep yet. I need to make sure you are truly warming up before you rest." Clara nodded, too tired to argue. She watched him move around the room, adding logs to the fire until it roared with heat, and then disappearing into the kitchen. She heard the sounds of him working, the clatter of pots and the clink of dishes. The warmth was seeping into her bones now, and with it came a strange emotional wave. She had expected to arrive in Montana to meet her future husband, to begin a new chapter of her life. Instead, she was stranded in a blizzard in the home of a stranger, with no prospects and no way forward. The urge to cry was overwhelming, but she fought it back. She had not cried when her father died, had not cried through any of the hardships of the past 2 years, and she would not start now. Owen returned with 2 steaming mugs and a bowl of stew. He handed her a mug first. "Drink this. It is mostly milk and honey with a little coffee. It will help warm you from the inside." The liquid was hot and sweet, and Clara drank it gratefully. Owen sat in the chair across from her, his own mug in his hands, and watched her with those assessing green eyes. "Can you hold the bowl, or do you need help?" he asked. "I can manage," Clara said, and was relieved when her hands cooperated. The stew was simple but good, thick with vegetables and chunks of beef. She ate slowly, feeling strength return to her body with each bite. "Why did you agree to come west to marry a man you had never met?" Owen asked suddenly. Clara looked up, startled by the directness of the question. "That is rather personal." You are sitting in my house, eating my food, and about to sleep under my roof, Owen said, not unkindly. I think I have a right to know something about you. He had a point. Clara set down her spoon and met his gaze. My father died 2 years ago. He was a clerk, and we were never wealthy, but we were comfortable. After his death, we discovered he had debts we did not know about. Everything we had went to pay them. My mother is not strong, and my 3 sisters are still young. The oldest besides me is only 15. I worked as a seamstress, but it was not enough to support all of us. When the opportunity came to marry someone who could help my family financially, I took it. So it was a business arrangement, Owen said. Most marriages are in one way or another, Clara replied. At least I was honest about my reasons. I wrote to Josiah and told him exactly why I was accepting his proposal. He said he understood, that he was lonely and wanted a wife and did not mind that I was being practical about it. We agreed we would try to make a good partnership, even if we did not marry for love. Owen was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee. That is a hard thing, he finally said. Giving up your whole life for your family. They are my family, Clara said simply. What else would I do? Something shifted in Owen's expression, a flash of understanding or respect. You are braver than you think, Clara laughed, but it came out bitter. I do not feel brave. I feel lost and frightened and completely out of my depth. That is what bravery is, Owen said. Doing what needs to be done even when you are terrified. They sat in silence for a while, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the howl of the wind outside. Clara finished her stew and felt almost human again. Her feet were starting to tingle, which Owen said was a good sign. Where will you go? Owen asked. When the storm clears, I mean. I do not know, Clara admitted. I suppose I will try to find work in town, until I can earn enough for a train ticket back east, though I am not sure what I will tell my family. The thought of writing to her mother to explain that she was coming home unmarried and unable to help them after all made her stomach twist with shame. Florissant is not a big town, Owen said. There is not much work available, especially for a woman alone. Mrs. Morrison might need help in the store, but she cannot afford to pay much. I will find something, Clara said with more confidence than she felt. I am not afraid of hard work. Owen studied her for another long moment, then stood abruptly. You need to sleep. You can barely keep your eyes open. The spare room is upstairs, first door on the right. There should be everything you need, clean sheets and blankets, a basin for washing. I will sleep down here by the fire. You do not have to give up your bed, Clara protested. I am not. That is the spare room. My room is the second door, but I will stay down here tonight anyway. Keep the fires going so the house stays warm. That blizzard is going to rage all night by the sound of it. Clara wanted to argue, but exhaustion was pulling at her like a physical weight. She stood carefully, testing her feet. They held her weight, though they still tingled uncomfortably. Thank you, Mr. Lancaster. I know this is an imposition, and I am grateful for your help. It is Owen, he said. And you are welcome. Get some rest, Clara. She climbed the stairs slowly, each step an effort. The spare room was simple but clean, with a bed covered in a colorful quilt, a small dresser, and a washstand. Someone had made this room with care. Clara wondered about Owen's life, about who lived in this house with him. He had mentioned a housekeeper, but the house had a feminine touch that spoke of more than just hired help. She changed into the nightgown Owen had provided, which was far too big but warm and soft. As she crawled under the quilts, she heard the wind battering the house and thought about the strangeness of fate. This morning she had been prepared to meet her future husband. Tonight she was sleeping in a stranger's house, her entire future uncertain. But despite everything, despite the fear and the uncertainty, she felt oddly safe. Owen Lancaster might be gruff and blunt, but there was a fundamental decency to him that she recognized instinctively. As sleep claimed her, her last thought was that she had never met anyone quite like the cowboy who had warmed her by his fire. Clara woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of coffee and bacon wafting up from downstairs. For a moment she was disoriented, unable to remember where she was. Then the events of the previous day crashed back into her consciousness, and she sat up quickly, her heart pounding. The room was cold despite the pile of quilts, and when she looked out the window, her breath caught. Snow was piled nearly 3 feet high against the house, and more was still falling, though not with the same violent intensity as the night before. The world outside was buried in white, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. She dressed quickly in her own clothes, which someone had hung over a chair to dry. They were stiff but wearable. When she made her way downstairs, she found Owen in the kitchen, cooking at the stove. He had shaved since last night and his hair was damp, as though he had washed in cold water. He looked up when she entered. "Morning," he said. "How are you feeling?" "Better, thank you," Clara said. "I am sorry I slept so late." "It is barely 7, Owen said, amusement touching his voice. "That is not late. Sit down. Breakfast is almost ready." Clara sat at the small kitchen table, feeling awkward and uncertain. In the daylight, the impropriety of her situation was even more apparent. She was alone in a house with an unmarried man, with no chaperone, and the storm showed no signs of letting up soon. Her reputation would be in tatters if word got out, though she supposed that hardly mattered now. Without marriage prospects and no money, her reputation was the least of her worries. Owen set a plate in front of her, piled high with eggs, bacon, and thick slices of bread. "Eat. You need your strength." "This is too much," Clara protested. "You barely ate anything last night. Eat what you can." They ate in silence for a few minutes before Clara gathered the courage to ask the question that had been nagging at her. "You mentioned a housekeeper, Mrs. Chen. Will she be back soon?" "Not for at least 2 weeks, maybe longer," Owen said. "Her daughter is expecting her first baby and Mrs. Chen wanted to be there to help. I told her to take as much time as she needed." "So we are alone here," Clara said quietly. "Yes." Owen met her eyes directly. "I know that is not ideal, but there is nothing to be done about it. The storm is too dangerous for you to go back to town, even if there was anywhere for you to stay. You will have to remain here until the weather clears and we can figure out what comes next." "People will talk," Clara said. "Probably," Owen agreed. "But people always talk. Does not mean we have to care what they say." Clara wished she could be so dismissive, but she knew how these things worked. A woman's reputation was everything, especially in a small town. If she was seen as compromised, her chances of making any kind of life for herself here would evaporate completely. "I can see you worrying," Owen said. "Stop it. We will handle whatever comes. For now, we have more practical concerns. That storm is going to last at least another day, maybe 2. I need to take care of the animals, make sure the barn stays secure and the livestock have enough food and water. You should stay inside where it is warm." "I can help," Clara offered. "I am not useless." Owen raised an eyebrow. "Have you ever worked on a ranch before?" "No, but I can learn." "I would rather be useful than sit around being a burden." Something like approval flickered in Owen's eyes. "All right. But you will do exactly what I tell you. The cold is dangerous, and if you get hurt or sick, we do not have a doctor close by." For the next 2 days, they fell into an unexpected rhythm. Owen taught Clara how to feed the chickens without getting pecked, how to milk the 2 cows he kept for fresh milk, how to muck out stalls and spread fresh hay. The work was hard and unfamiliar, and Clara made plenty of mistakes, but Owen was patient in his teaching. He did not coddle her or treat her like she was fragile, which Clara appreciated more than she could say. In the evenings, they sat by the fire and talked. Owen told her about coming west from Ohio after his parents died in a fire, about building his ranch from nothing with money he had saved working on the railroad. He talked about the harsh winters and the beauty of the Montana landscape in summer, about the challenges of ranching and the satisfaction of building something with his own hands. Clara told him about Philadelphia, about her father's love of books and her mother's skill with needlework, about her sisters and their different personalities. She talked about the cramped apartment they had moved to after her father's death, about the long hours sewing in poor light to make enough money for food, about the constant fear that they would end up on the streets. "You could have remarried," Owen said one evening. "Your mother, I mean." Surely she had offers. She did, Clara said, but none that she could accept. One man wanted her but not her children. Another was kind but drank too much. She said she would not bring someone into our lives who would make things worse instead of better. So she chose to struggle alone rather than risk it. "She sounds like a strong woman," Owen said. "She is," Clara agreed. "But strength does not pay the rent or put food on the table. That is why I had to do something." On the third day, the storm finally broke. Clara woke to silence instead of howling wind, and when she looked outside, she saw blue sky for the first time since arriving in Montana. The relief was overwhelming, but it brought with it a new anxiety. Now that the storm had passed, decisions had to be made. She found Owen in the barn, repairing a section of wall that had been damaged by the wind. He looked up when she entered, and she saw the same awareness in his eyes that she felt. The strange suspended time they had been living in was over. Reality was crashing back in. "The storm is done," she said unnecessarily. "Yes," Owen said. "Roads will need a day or two to be passable, but after that you could go back to town if you wanted. And if I do not want to—" The words came out before Clara could think them through. Owen set down his hammer. "What are you saying?" Clara took a deep breath. "I am saying that these past few days have been strange and difficult, but also, I have felt more like myself than I have in 2 years. I like the work here. I like the simplicity of it, the way every task has a clear purpose. And I like talking to you. You do not treat me like I am fragile or foolish. You treat me like an equal." "You are an equal," Owen said. "But Clara, you cannot stay here. You know what people will think." "I know what they will think regardless," Clara said. "I have already been here for 3 days alone with you. The damage is done. At least if I stay, I would be useful and earning my keep. You said yourself that Mrs. Chen will be gone for weeks. You could use the help around the ranch. You are talking about staying as what? A hired hand?" Owen asked, his voice carefully neutral. "I suppose I am," Clara said, "unless you have a better idea." Owen was quiet for a long moment, his green eyes searching her face. "I do have another idea," he finally said, "but you are going to think I am crazy. Tell me anyway, marry me." The words were blunt and shocking in the quiet of the barn. Clara felt like she had been punched in the stomach. "What? You came here to marry a man you never met because you needed to help your family," Owen said, the words coming faster now. "That situation has not changed. You still need money to send back to Philadelphia. I need a wife, someone to help run this ranch and keep this house from falling apart. We have gotten along well these past few days. We work well together. It makes practical sense." "You are talking about a business arrangement," Clara said slowly. "Yes," Owen said. "Same as you had with Josiah Miller. A partnership. We could help each other." "But we barely know each other," Clara protested, even as part of her mind was racing ahead, seeing the logic in his proposal. "We have spent 3 days living in the same house, working together, talking every evening," Owen pointed out. That is more than a lot of people know about each other before they marry. And you already know I will not mistreat you. You have seen how I live, what kind of man I am." He was right, Clara realized. She did know him, or at least she knew the essential things that mattered. She knew he was hardworking and honest, that he treated animals and people with equal consideration, that he was patient when teaching her new tasks and did not mock her mistakes. She knew he was lonely in a way that went bone deep, and that he had a quiet strength that made her feel safe. "What about love?" she asked quietly. "What about it?" Owen said. "You were willing to marry without it before, and who knows, maybe it would come in time. Or maybe we would just be good partners, running this ranch together and making a life that worked for both of us. That seems like more than a lot of people have." Clara thought about going back to Philadelphia with nothing to show for her journey but shame and failure. She thought about her mother's worried face and her sister's disappointment. She thought about going back to sewing in that cramped apartment, watching her family struggle and being unable to help them. Then she thought about the past 3 days, about the satisfaction of learning new skills and the surprising pleasure of Owen's company. She thought about having a home of her own, a place where she could be useful and valued. It was not what she had imagined for her life, but then again, very little had gone as she imagined. "If I agreed," she said slowly, "what would the terms be?" Owen's expression did not change, but she saw relief flash through his eyes. "I would send money to your family every month, enough to keep them comfortable. You would help run the ranch and manage the house. We would be partners in all things, equal say in decisions. Your money would be your own to do with as you pleased." I would not expect," he paused, clearly uncomfortable. "We could keep separate rooms until or unless we both wanted otherwise." "That is very practical," Clara said, unable to keep a note of sadness from her voice. "You want romance," Owen said, and it was not quite a question. "I suppose I am foolish enough to hope for it, yes," Clara admitted. "But I am also practical enough to know that security and respect might be more valuable in the long run. All right, Owen Lancaster, I will marry you." The wedding took place 4 days later in Florissant's small church, with Mrs. Morrison and the minister's wife as witnesses. Clara wore her best dress, a simple blue wool that she had packed for meeting Josiah, and Owen wore a clean shirt and jacket that he clearly did not wear often, judging by how uncomfortable he looked. The ceremony was brief and businesslike, and when the minister told Owen he could kiss his bride, Owen hesitated before pressing a chaste kiss to Clara's forehead. The talk in town was exactly what Clara had expected. She saw the knowing looks and heard the whispered speculation about how quickly Owen Lancaster had snapped up the pretty mail-order bride who had been meant for dead Josiah Miller. But Owen seemed unbothered by it, and gradually Clara learned to ignore it as well. Life on the ranch settled into a routine. Clara learned more about ranching every day, from mending fences to helping with calving when spring came. Owen had a small herd of cattle, maybe 30 head, and a few horses beyond Thunder that he was training to sell. The work was constant and often exhausting, but Clara found she preferred it to the tedious hours bent over needlework in poor light. Mrs. Chen returned after 6 weeks, delighted to find that Owen had married in her absence. She was a small woman in her 50s, originally from San Francisco, who had come to Montana with her husband before he died in a mining accident. She had been keeping house for Owen for 3 years, and she folded Clara into the household with brisk efficiency, teaching her how Owen liked his coffee and which sections of the garden produced the best vegetables. "He is a good man," Mrs. Chen told Clara one day while they were washing clothes. "Quiet, keeps to himself, but good-hearted. His parents would be proud of what he built here." "You knew his parents?" Clara asked. "No, but he talks about them sometimes. They were hard workers, saved every penny to give him a better life. That fire that killed them, it destroyed everything they had worked for. Owen says coming west was his way of honoring their sacrifice, building something that would last. Clara thought about that conversation often in the weeks that followed. She watched Owen working from dawn until dark, repairing buildings and tending animals and planning for the future. He never complained about the work or the hardship. There was a quiet determination to him that she had come to admire deeply, but between them, there remained a careful distance. They were friendly and cooperative, like business partners should be. They ate meals together and discussed the needs of the ranch. At night, they sat by the fire and talked about safe topics like the weather and the neighbors and plans for expanding the herd. But they did not talk about anything deeper. Owen never touched her beyond the occasional brush of hands when passing something at the table. He kept to his room and she kept to hers. Clara told herself this was what she had agreed to, that she should be grateful for the security and respect Owen showed her. But as weeks turned into months, she found herself longing for something more. She noticed things about Owen that made her pulse quicken. The way his hands moved when he worked with the horses, gentle and sure. The rare smile that transformed his serious face. The sound of his voice when he talked about something he cared about, like the land or the animals or his plans for the future. She was falling in love with her husband, and she had no idea if he felt anything for her beyond practical appreciation. Summer came to Montana with a rush of warmth and wildflowers. The mountains that had been snow-covered when Clara arrived turned green and purple with blooming lupine. Owen taught her to ride, first on gentle old Daisy and then on a younger mare named Copper that he said could be hers. They rode out together to check on the cattle, sometimes spending whole days in the high meadows where the grass grew thick and the air smelled like pine and sun-warmed earth. On one of these rides, they stopped to rest by a stream that tumbled down from the mountains, clear and cold. Clara dismounted and went to the water's edge, kneeling to splash her face. When she looked up, she found Owen watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "What is it?" she asked. "You look happy," Owen said. "Happier than when you first arrived." "I am happy," Clara said, surprised to realize it was true. "I like my life here. I like the work and the land and—" she hesitated, then decided to be brave. "And I like you, Owen. More than I probably should, given our arrangement." Owen dismounted and came to sit beside her on the bank. "What if I said I liked you too, more than I should?" Clara's heart began to pound. "Do you?" "I never wanted a marriage of convenience," Owen said, staring at the water. "After my parents died, after I lost everything, I told myself I would never care that much about anyone again. Caring hurts too much when you lose people. So when I proposed to you, I told myself it was just practical, just a way to have help with the ranch and someone to come home to. And now," Clara whispered. "Now I am terrified," Owen said, finally looking at her. "Because somehow in the past few months you stopped being just a convenient arrangement. You became someone I think about all the time. Someone I watch for when I am out working, hoping to catch a glimpse of you. Someone whose laugh I would do anything to hear. I am falling in love with you, Clara, and it scares me to death." Clara felt tears spring to her eyes. "I am falling in love with you too. I have been for weeks, maybe longer. But I thought you wanted to keep things businesslike between us, so I tried to hide it." Owen reached out and cupped her face with one calloused hand. "I am an idiot." "You are my idiot," Clara said, and then he was kissing her, really kissing her for the first time. It was nothing like the chaste peck at their wedding. This kiss was full of months of suppressed longing, of feelings neither of them had dared to speak. Clara kissed him back with equal fervor, her hands fisting in his shirt. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Owen rested his forehead against hers. "I want to do this right," he said. "I want to court you properly, bring you flowers, and take you on buggy rides like a proper gentleman." Clara laughed. "Owen, we are married. We live in the same house. I think we are past courting." "Still," Owen said stubbornly, "I want to show you that this is not just convenience for me. I want you to know that I choose you, not because it makes sense, but because I cannot imagine my life without you anymore." Over the next weeks, Owen made good on his promise. He brought Clara wildflowers from the meadows. He took her fishing in the stream and taught her to cast a line. He sat with her in the evenings and told her stories about his childhood, about his parents and the dreams they had for him. He made her laugh with tales of his early days trying to ranch when he barely knew which end of a cow was which. And Clara opened up in return, telling him things she had never told anyone. About the fear that had consumed her after her father's death, about the shame of poverty and the constant anxiety of not knowing how they would survive. About her guilt at leaving her family, even though she knew it was the best way to help them. "You carry too much," Owen told her one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sun set. "You are allowed to think about yourself too, to want things just for you." "I am not used to that," Clara admitted. "For so long, everything I did was about survival. I do not know how to just live for the joy of it." "Then I will teach you," Owen said, pulling her close. "Same as you taught me that it is okay to care again, to let someone in." They moved into the same bedroom that night, and Clara finally felt like she was truly married. Owen was gentle and patient, taking his time to learn what made her sigh with pleasure. There was none of the rushed awkwardness she had heard other women whisper about. Just tenderness and growing passion, two people learning each other in the most intimate way possible. In the fall, Clara's mother and sisters came to visit, making the long journey west with money that Owen had sent for their tickets. Clara barely recognized her youngest sister, who had grown several inches in the month since she had seen her. They descended on the ranch like a chattering flock of birds, exclaiming over everything from the mountains to the chickens. "You look so different," Clara's mother said, studying her with shrewd eyes. "Healthy and strong and happy." "I am happy, Mama," Clara said. "I know this is not what we planned, but it turned out better than I ever imagined." Her mother smiled. "Sometimes the best things are the ones we do not plan. Your young man seems good to you." "He is," Clara said, watching Owen showing her sisters how to gather eggs while they giggled at his serious instructions. "He is the best man I have ever known." The visit lasted 2 weeks, and by the end, even Owen's reserve had thawed under the warmth of Clara's family. He promised to bring Clara east for a visit the following year, and to continue sending money to help with expenses. When they left, Clara's youngest sister cried and made Clara promise to write every week. Winter came again, Clara's second in Montana. This time she was prepared for the cold, with proper warm clothes and a knowledge of what needed to be done to ready the ranch for the harsh weather. As the first snow began to fall, she and Owen stood on the porch watching the flakes drift down. "You remember the night we met?" Owen asked. "When I brought you here through that blizzard, I remember thinking I had made the worst mistake of my life," Clara said. "Coming west to marry a stranger, only to end up stranded with a different stranger in a snowstorm. And now I think it was the best mistake I ever made," Clara said, leaning into his warmth. "If Josiah Miller had not died, I never would have met you. I would have had a practical marriage with a man I did not love, and I never would have known what I was missing." "That is a hard thing to say," Owen said quietly. "A man died." "I know," Clara said, "and I do not mean to sound callous. I am sorry he died, sorry he never got the chance at the life he wanted, but I cannot pretend I am sorry about where I ended up. Does that make me terrible?" "It makes you honest," Owen said. And no, you are not terrible. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Clara Lancaster." They went inside and warmed themselves by the fire, and Clara thought about how different this winter was from the last. Then she had been a desperate stranger, clinging to the warmth of Owen's hospitality. Now she was home, wrapped in the warmth of a love she had never expected to find. By spring, Clara realized she was pregnant. Mrs. Chen noticed before she did, commenting on Clara's sudden aversion to coffee and the way she was tired more easily. When Clara finally admitted the possibility to Owen, his face went through a series of expressions she could not quite read. "Are you happy?" she asked, suddenly uncertain. "Happy," Owen said, and then he was sweeping her into his arms and spinning her around. "I am terrified and thrilled and completely overwhelmed. A baby, Clara. We are going to have a baby." The pregnancy was not easy. Clara was sick for the first few months, barely able to keep food down. Owen hovered like an anxious mother hen, which drove her crazy even as she appreciated his concern. Mrs. Chen made ginger tea and bland foods that sometimes helped. Gradually, the sickness passed, and Clara bloomed into the later months of pregnancy with a contentment she had never known before. Their son was born on a crisp October morning, with Mrs. Chen and a midwife from town in attendance. Owen paced in the kitchen, wearing a path in the floorboards until Mrs. Chen finally told him to go work off his energy outside. The labor was long and painful, but when Clara finally held her baby in her arms, she understood why women went through this. The love she felt was immediate and overwhelming. They named him Samuel, after Owen's father. He had a shock of dark hair and lung capacity that suggested he would never be a quiet child. Owen held him with shaking hands, his eyes wet with tears he did not bother to hide. "He is perfect," Owen whispered. "You are perfect. I do not know what I did to deserve this, but I swear I will spend the rest of my life being worthy of it." "You already are," Clara said. "You have been from the start." Life with a baby was chaotic and exhausting. Samuel had strong opinions about when he wanted to eat and sleep, and those opinions rarely aligned with what anyone else wanted. But even in the depths of exhaustion, with spit up on her shoulder and her hair in a messy knot, Clara had never been happier. She watched Owen with their son and fell in love with him all over again. He was so gentle, so patient, singing little songs he made up and walking the floor at night when Samuel would not settle. "You are a good father," she told him one evening after he had finally gotten Samuel to sleep. "I am trying," Owen said. "My father was the best man I knew. I want to be that for Samuel." "You will be," Clara said with certainty. The years passed in a blur of seasons and growth. Samuel grew from a baby into a toddler who followed Owen everywhere, his small legs pumping to keep up. They added to their herd, expanding the ranch slowly and carefully. Owen taught Clara to keep the books, and she discovered she had a head for numbers and planning. Together they made decisions about which cattle to sell and when, how to improve the land, whether to invest in new equipment or save for harder times. When Samuel was 3, Clara became pregnant again. This time she knew what to expect, and the pregnancy was easier. Their daughter was born in the spring, small and dark-haired like her brother. They named her Rose after Clara's grandmother. Owen was just as besotted with her as he had been with Samuel, and Clara loved watching him with a tiny daughter in his arms, singing her the same silly songs he had sung to her brother. Life was not always easy. There were hard winters and dry summers, times when money was tight and worry kept them both awake at night. There were illnesses and injuries, the normal trials of raising children and running a ranch. But through it all, Clara and Owen faced everything together, partners in truth as well as in name. On their 5th anniversary, Owen brought Clara flowers from the meadow, just as he had when they were courting. They sat on the porch after the children were asleep, watching the stars come out over the mountains. "You ever regret it?" Owen asked. "Staying here instead of going back east?" "Never," Clara said without hesitation. "This is my home. You and the children, this ranch, this life we built. It is everything I never knew I wanted." "Even though it started with a lie?" Owen asked. "You came here to marry someone else." "Maybe that is how it started," Clara said. "But the truth is, I did not really start living until I married you. Everything before was just surviving. You taught me the difference." Owen pulled her close, kissing her temple. "You taught me how to hope again, how to let someone in. I was so closed off when we met, so determined not to care about anyone. You changed all of that." "We changed each other," Clara said. "That is what love does." When Samuel was 5 and Rose was 2, Owen's cattle operation had grown successful enough that they needed more help. They hired a young man from town and built a small bunkhouse for him to live in. With the extra help, Owen had more time to spend with his family. He taught Samuel to ride and took Clara on long rides into the mountains, leaving the children with Mrs. Chen. These stolen hours alone became precious to both of them, time to remember that they were not just parents and ranchers, but also husband and wife, still deeply in love. Clara never forgot those first days in Montana, arriving in a blizzard to find her intended husband dead and her future uncertain. She thought about how terrified she had been, how close she had come to giving up. And she thought about Owen, the gruff cowboy who had taken in a stranger and warmed her by his fire, never knowing that he was also warming her heart. She wrote to her mother regularly, long letters full of details about the children and the ranch and life in Montana. Her sisters had all grown up and made their own ways. The middle 2 had married, and the youngest was teaching school in Philadelphia. Her mother's letters were full of pride in all her daughters, but especially in Clara, who had gone furthest and risked most. "You were the bravest," her mother wrote. "Going into the unknown like that with nothing but hope and determination. Look at what you built from that courage." When Samuel was 7, he started school in Florissant, making the ride into town each day on his pony. He was bright and curious, always full of questions about everything from why the sky was blue to how cattle knew where to find the best grass. Rose was more serious, watching everything with solemn dark eyes and surprising everyone with insightful observations. "She is like you," Clara told Owen. "She sees everything, understands more than people expect." "And Samuel is like you," Owen replied. "Never met a silence he could not fill or a person he could not charm." One winter evening, when a blizzard raged outside much like the one that had brought Clara to Montana 8 years earlier, the family gathered around the fire. Samuel was practicing his letters, laboriously copying from a book. Rose was playing with a wooden horse Owen had carved for her. Clara was mending clothes and Owen was reviewing the ranch accounts. "Tell us the story," Samuel said suddenly, looking up from his work. "What story?" Clara asked. "How you and Papa met. You always say you will tell me when I am older. I am older now." Clara looked at Owen, who shrugged with a small smile. "He is not wrong." So Clara told the story, editing out the parts that were too adult for young ears. She told them about coming west to start a new life, about the blizzard and being stranded, about how their father had taken her in and kept her safe. She told them about learning to work on a ranch and slowly becoming friends with the quiet cowboy who owned it. "And then you fell in love," Samuel said, clearly pleased with this development. "Yes," Clara agreed. "And then we fell in love." "Was it like in the stories?" Rose asked. "Like the fairy tales," Clara thought about that. "In fairy tales, love was always simple and immediate." A prince saw a princess and knew at once she was his destiny. But real love, the kind she and Owen had built, was more complicated and more rewarding. "It was better than the stories," she said finally, "because it was real. We chose each other every day, even when it was hard. That is what real love is, not magic or destiny, but choosing to be together and working to build something good." "I want that kind of love someday," Samuel declared. "I hope you find it," Owen said. "But in the meantime, you have chores in the morning, so you had better get to bed." After the children were tucked in, Clara and Owen returned to the fire. The storm howled outside, but inside it was warm and safe. Clara leaned against her husband's shoulder, feeling his steady heartbeat under her cheek. "You ever wonder how different things might have been?" she asked. "If that first blizzard had not been so bad, if there had been room at the boarding house, if you had not offered to bring me here." "I try not to think about it," Owen said. "It makes me feel sick to imagine you going back east or staying in town, and us never really getting to know each other. So much had to go exactly wrong for things to go right." "My mother says that is how God works sometimes," Clara said, "closing doors so better ones can open." "Then I am grateful for every closed door that led me to you," Owen said. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn. Outside, the blizzard raged on, but Clara felt no fear. She was home, surrounded by love, living a life she could not have imagined that first terrible night when she arrived in Montana with nothing but desperation and hope. Years continued to pass, each season bringing new challenges and joys. Samuel grew tall and serious, taking on more responsibility around the ranch. Rose surprised everyone by showing a talent for training horses, able to gentle even the most skittish animals with patience and quiet confidence. Owen and Clara watched their children grow with pride and the bittersweet awareness that time was moving too fast. When Samuel was 12 and Rose was 9, Clara became pregnant again, a surprise that left them both shocked and delighted. She was older now, and the pregnancy was harder than the previous ones. Owen worried constantly, hovering even more than he had with Samuel. But in the summer of that year, they welcomed twin boys, identical and tiny and perfect. They named them Daniel and David, and suddenly the ranch was full of chaos again, this time with Samuel and Rose pressed into service helping with their baby brothers. "I am too old for this," Clara said one exhausting evening when both twins were crying and refusing to be soothed. "You are magnificent," Owen said, taking one of the twins from her. "And we will survive this, just like we have survived everything else." They did survive it, though there were times when Clara was not sure how. But Samuel and Rose were wonderful with their younger brothers, and Mrs. Chen seemed to have infinite patience for crying babies. Gradually, the twins settled into routines, and life became manageable again. By the time the twins were walking, Samuel was 15 and starting to think about his future. He loved the ranch and wanted to stay, but Clara insisted he continue his education. Owen agreed, and they made arrangements for Samuel to attend a school in Helena during the year, coming home for summers and holidays. It was hard to let him go, but Clara knew it was necessary. She wanted her children to have choices, to see more of the world than just Florissant. Rose had no interest in leaving. She was happiest on the ranch, working with the horses and helping Owen with the cattle. At 12, she could rope and ride as well as most grown men, and she had a gift for reading animals that even Owen admired. Clara sometimes worried that Rose was too much like her father, too willing to close herself off and hide behind work. But then she would see Rose laughing with her brothers or helping a mare through a difficult birth with tears of joy streaming down her face, and Clara would realize her daughter was just fine. On their 15th anniversary, Clara and Owen took a rare trip alone, leaving the children with Mrs. Chen and the ranch hands they now employed. They rode up into the mountains to the spot where they had first admitted their love for each other, all those years ago. The stream still burbled over rocks, and wildflowers still bloomed in the meadow. 15 years, Owen said, shaking his head in wonder. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like I have known you my whole life. We have built a good life, Clara said, better than I ever dreamed possible when I stepped off that stage into the blizzard. Do you remember how terrified you looked? Owen asked, smiling at the memory. Like a half-frozen kitten, all big eyes and desperation. I was terrified, Clara admitted. Everything I had planned had fallen apart, and I had no idea what I was going to do. Then there you were, all gruff and practical, telling me you would help me whether it was proper or not. I could not leave you there, Owen said. Even then, something in me recognized something in you, like I had been waiting for you without knowing it. You old romantic, Clara teased, but her eyes were wet. Only with you, Owen said, pulling her into his arms. Only ever with you. They made love there in the meadow under the wide Montana sky with 15 years of love and partnership between them. Afterward, they lay in the grass and talked about their dreams for the future, about the ranch and the children and the life they were still building together. I want to take you to Ohio someday, Owen said. Show you where I came from, visit my parents' graves. I have not been back since I left. Then we will go, Clara said. Next year, maybe, when the twins are a little older, we could take all the children, let them see where their father grew up. And Philadelphia, Owen said. We should take them there too. Let them meet your mother and sisters, see where you came from. A grand tour, Clara said, smiling. The Lancaster family sees America. They did make that trip the following summer when the twins were 3. They traveled by train, a luxury that still amazed Clara after all these years. Samuel came home from Helena to join them, now 16 and filling out into a man. The children were wide-eyed and excited, pointing out everything from towns to rivers to herds of buffalo. In Ohio, they visited the graves of Owen's parents, and Clara watched her husband kneel in the grass and tell his mother and father about his family, his voice breaking with emotion. The children were quiet and respectful, understanding somehow that this was important. In Philadelphia, Clara's mother wept with joy to see all her grandchildren together. Her sisters descended with hugs and questions, and for a week, the small apartment was full of noise and laughter. Clara looked around at her family, at the people she loved all gathered in one place, and felt a gratitude so intense it was almost painful. You did it, her mother said one evening when they were alone. You saved us all, not just with the money, though that helped more than you know. But you showed us that it was possible to take a risk, to bet on yourself and win. Your sisters had the courage to pursue their own dreams because they watched you do it first. I did not feel courageous, Clara said. I felt desperate and terrified. That is what courage is, her mother said, echoing words Owen had once spoken. Being afraid and doing it anyway. They returned to Montana at the end of summer, all of them happy to be home. As the ranch came into view, with the mountains rising behind it and the meadows stretching green and gold, Clara felt her heart swell. This was home in a way Philadelphia had never been. This was where she belonged. The years continued their steady march. Samuel graduated from school and returned to the ranch permanently, taking on more and more responsibility as Owen gradually did less of the physical work. Rose developed a reputation for training horses, and people came from all over the territory to buy animals she had gentled. The twins grew into rambunctious boys who kept everyone on their toes with their adventures and mischief. When Clara was 40, Mrs. Chen decided to retire and go live with her daughter in Helena. She had been part of their family for so long that her departure left a hole. But Rose stepped in, taking over the management of the household with calm efficiency that reminded Clara of Mrs. Chen herself. Owen's hair went gray at the temples, and Clara found laugh lines forming around her eyes and mouth. They were getting older, but Clara did not mind. Every line on her face was earned through laughter or worry for people she loved. Every gray hair was a testament to years well lived. On their 20th anniversary, the whole family gathered for a celebration. Samuel brought a young woman he was courting, a rancher's daughter from a neighboring property. Rose announced she had been asked to train horses for a cavalry unit and was considering taking the contract. The twins, now 8, performed a song they had learned at school with more enthusiasm than skill. After dinner, Clara and Owen slipped away to the porch, seeking a moment of quiet. The sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. 20 years, Clara said. We have been married for 20 years. Best 20 years of my life, Owen said, pulling her close. Even the hard parts I would not trade a single day. Me neither, Clara said. Do you remember when you proposed, how businesslike and practical it all was? I was an idiot, Owen said. I thought I could keep my heart out of it, treat it like any other business arrangement. I had no idea I was already half in love with you and just too stubborn to admit it. When did you know? Clara asked. When did you know it was more than just practical? Owen thought about that. Remember that first week, when you insisted on helping with the chores even though you had no idea what you were doing. You were trying to milk Bessie, and she kicked the bucket over, and you just sat there in the spilled milk looking so frustrated and determined. I laughed, and you looked up at me and started laughing too, even though you were covered in milk. That was when I knew. When I realized I wanted to hear that laugh for the rest of my life. I fell in love with you slowly, Clara said, a little bit more each day. The way you were patient when teaching me things. The way you talked to the animals. The way you looked at the mountains like they were the most beautiful thing you had ever seen. And then one day I woke up and realized I could not imagine my life without you in it. We built something good, Owen said. Not just the ranch or the family, but us, what we are to each other. The best thing I ever built, Clara agreed. As the stars came out over Montana, Clara thought about that frightened girl who had arrived in a blizzard 20 years ago, with nothing but a carpet bag and desperate hope. She thought about the gruff cowboy who had taken her in and warmed her by his fire, never knowing he was also warming her heart. She thought about all the years between then and now, all the joys and sorrows and ordinary days that had woven together into a life. If she could go back and tell that girl what the future held, what would she say? That the man who seemed like a stranger would become the love of her life. That the marriage of convenience would become a love story that sustained them both through everything life threw at them. That the desperate escape from poverty would become a homecoming to a place and person that fit her soul, but she could not go back, and she would not if she could. Every step of the journey had been necessary, every hard moment and every joy. It had made them who they were, together and separately. What are you thinking about? Owen asked, sensing her reflective mood. About how grateful I am, Clara said. For that blizzard, for you taking me in, for every choice and chance that led us here. I would not change a single thing. Even the hard parts, Owen asked. Especially the hard parts, Clara said. They made the good parts possible. They taught us who we were and what we could survive together. Owen kissed her, soft and sweet, a kiss that held 20 years of love and partnership. Here is to the next 20 years, he said. And all the years after that, Clara added. Every single one, as long as we have together. They stood there on the porch of their home, surrounded by the land they had worked and the family they had built, and watched the night come on. Inside, they could hear the sounds of their children laughing and talking. Around them, the ranch settled in for the night with the familiar sounds of animals and wind. This was the life Clara had built from the ashes of her desperate gamble. This was the love she had found in the arms of a cowboy who warmed her by his fire. And it was more, so much more, than she had ever dared to dream possible on that cold winter night when she first arrived in Montana, afraid and alone and hoping for a miracle. She had found her miracle in Owen Lancaster, and in the life they built together. And every day, for the rest of their days, she would be grateful for the blizzard that brought them together, and the fire that kept them warm through every storm that followed. The years rolled on like the seasons, each bringing its own particular blessings and challenges. Samuel married his sweetheart in a ceremony at the ranch, with the whole territory seemingly in attendance. They built a house on the far side of the property and began raising their own family, working the land alongside Owen, and eventually taking over more and more of the daily operations, as Owen's body began to feel the wear of decades of hard ranching work. Rose never married, a choice that worried Clara until she realized her daughter was genuinely happy. She had her horses and her independence, and she traveled throughout the territory building a reputation as one of the finest horse trainers in Montana. She came home between jobs, and the ranch was always her anchor, but she had found her own way in the world. The twins grew into young men who were as different as twins could be despite looking identical. Daniel was quiet and studious, eventually becoming a teacher in Florissant. David stayed on the ranch, working alongside Samuel and eventually courting a girl from town whom he married when he was 23. Clara became a grandmother, and then a grandmother many times over. Samuel and his wife had 4 children in quick succession. David and his wife added 3 more. Even Rose, who never married, brought a young boy to the ranch one day, an orphan from town who had nowhere to go. She raised him as her own, and he became another grandson for Clara to spoil. Owen's hair went completely white, and his hands developed arthritis that made the fine work of ranching difficult. But his mind stayed sharp, and he was always ready with advice or a story for his grandchildren. He taught them to ride and rope, to read the weather and the land, to understand that ranching was not just work, but a way of life that required respect for the animals and the earth. On their 30th anniversary, the family threw a huge celebration. Children and grandchildren filled every corner of the house and spilled out into the yard. There was music and dancing, food enough to feed an army, and speeches that made both Clara and Owen cry with happiness and embarrassment. 30 years ago, I was the luckiest man in Montana, Owen said when it was his turn to speak. A beautiful woman agreed to take a chance on a rough cowboy who barely knew how to talk to people, let alone court a lady. I did not deserve her then, and I do not deserve her now. But I am grateful every single day that she chose me anyway. I chose well, Clara said, standing beside him. I came to Montana looking for security and found love instead. I came looking for a home and found a family. Every choice I made, every risk I took, led me here. And I would do it all again in a heartbeat. Their grandson, Samuel's oldest boy who was 12, stood up then. Grandma, tell us the story again, about the blizzard. You have heard that story 100 times, Clara protested, but we never get tired of it, Rose said from across the room. It is our family story. It is where we all began. So Clara told the story once more, with Owen adding details and corrections as she went. She told them about stepping off the stage into the worst storm she had ever seen, about learning that her intended husband had died, about Owen's gruff offer to take her to his ranch. She told them about learning to ranch, about falling in love slowly and certainly, about choosing to build a life together. It was not perfect, she said. There were hard times and struggles. Times when we wondered if we would make it, if the ranch would survive, if we were strong enough for what life demanded. But we had each other, and that made all the difference. True love, Samuel's youngest daughter said dreamily, and everyone laughed. True partnership, Owen corrected gently. Love is part of it, but so is respect and hard work and choosing each other every day, even when it is hard. Especially when it is hard. As the party continued around them, Clara and Owen found themselves alone on the porch once more, the same spot where they had spent countless evenings over the past 3 decades. "You think they understand?" Clara asked. "The children and grandchildren. Do you think they really understand what we built here?" "Some of them do," Owen said. "Samuel understands. He is living it now, building his own legacy. Rose understands in her way. The others will understand when they are older and looking back on their own lives." "I hope they know how much I love them," Clara said. "All of them, every single one. They are the best thing we ever made, you and I." "They know," Owen assured her. "How could they not? You show them every day in 1,000 ways." Clara leaned against her husband, feeling the solid warmth of him beside her. He was not as strong as he once was, and neither was she. They both moved more slowly now, needed more rest, felt the cold more keenly. But the love between them had only grown stronger with time, deepening into something so fundamental that Clara could not remember what it felt like to live without it. "I am tired," she admitted. "More tired than I used to be." "We have earned our rest," Owen said. "We have built something that will outlast us. The ranch will go on with Samuel and David. Our grandchildren will tell their children about us someday. We have left our mark on this land and this family." "No regrets?" Clara asked. "Not a single one," Owen said firmly. "Except maybe that we did not have more time. I could live 100 years with you and it still would not be enough." "Then we will have to make every day count," Clara said. And they did. Even as their bodies slowed, they continued to live fully. They took walks around the property, moving slowly but determined to see every corner of the land they loved. They sat with their grandchildren and told stories about the old days. They watched sunsets from their porch and counted stars on clear nights. Owen developed a persistent cough the winter Clara turned 55. By spring, it was clear that something was seriously wrong. The doctor from Florissant came and examined him, and his face was grave when he spoke to Clara privately. "His lungs are failing," the doctor said. "Years of breathing cold air and working in all weather have damaged them. I am sorry, Mrs. Lancaster. There is nothing to be done but keep him comfortable." Clara felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Not Owen. Not her partner, her love, her other half. She was not ready. She would never be ready. But she was strong, stronger than she knew. She had been building that strength for 32 years, ever since a cowboy warmed her by his fire and taught her what it meant to truly live. She would not fall apart now when Owen needed her most. She moved their bed downstairs so Owen would not have to climb the stairs. She sat with him for hours, reading to him or just holding his hand. The family came, of course. Samuel and David took turns staying at the house, helping with chores and keeping vigil. Rose came home from a training job and refused to leave. The grandchildren visited, and Owen rallied enough to tell them stories and make them laugh. On a warm June evening, with the windows open and the smell of honeysuckle drifting in, Owen took Clara's hand and looked into her eyes. "It has been a good life," he said, his voice weak but steady. "The best life because I lived it with you." "Do not talk like that," Clara said, even though she knew. She had known for weeks that this was coming. "You are going to get better. You are too stubborn not to." "Clara," Owen said gently, We both know that is not true, and it is all right. I am not afraid. How can I be afraid when I have had so much? When I have been loved so completely by the most extraordinary woman I ever met? Tears streamed down Clara's face. I cannot do this without you. I do not know how to be in this world without you in it. Yes, you can, Owen said firmly. You are the strongest person I know. You will grieve and it will hurt, but you will survive. You will keep the ranch going, keep the family together, keep living. Promise me you will keep living, Clara. Promise me you will not just exist but really live, the way we always have. I promise, Clara whispered, though she could not imagine how. I love you, Owen said. From that first blizzard to this moment I have loved you. Every day, every hour, you made my life worth living. I love you too, Clara said, so much, more than words can say. Owen smiled then, that rare, beautiful smile that still made her heart skip. I know, I have always known, what a gift that was to be loved by you. He died that night, quietly and peacefully, with Clara's hand in his and his children gathered around his bed. One moment he was breathing, the next he was gone. Just like that, 32 years of partnership ended. The grief was devastating. Clara had known it would be hard, but she had not understood the physical nature of it, the way her body ached with loss, the way food tasted like ashes, the way she woke reaching for Owen and found only emptiness. She had not understood how every small thing would remind her of him, how she would turn to tell him something a dozen times a day and remember each time that he was gone. But she had promised Owen she would keep living, and she kept that promise. She got up each morning even when she did not want to. She worked around the ranch, taking comfort in the familiar routines. She sat with her grandchildren and told them stories about their grandfather. She lived. Slowly, the sharp edge of grief dulled into something she could carry. She still missed Owen every day, but she began to find joy again too. Joy in her family, in the land, in small, beautiful moments like a sunrise over the mountains or a grandchild's laughter. She lived for another 15 years after Owen's death, watching her grandchildren grow up and begin having children of their own. She became a great-grandmother, a matriarch who held the family together with her quiet strength and endless love. She made sure the stories were told, that the grandchildren and great-grandchildren knew where they came from and what had been sacrificed to build the life they enjoyed. On a cold January morning, 2 months after her 70th birthday, Clara woke feeling different. She was not sick or in pain, but she knew somehow that this was her last day. She asked Samuel to gather the family, and they came, filling her room just as they had filled Owen's on his last night. I want to tell you the story one more time, Clara said. The real story, the complete one. So she told them everything. About the desperation that drove her west, about the terror of arriving in a blizzard to find her intended dead, about Owen's gruff kindness in taking her in. She told them about falling in love, about building a life together, about the hard times and the good times and everything in between. The point, she said, is not that everything worked out perfectly. It did not. There was pain and loss and struggle. The point is that we faced it together, Owen and I. We chose each other every single day, and that choosing made all the difference. That is what I want you to remember. That love is not just a feeling but a choice, and a good life is built one choice at a time. We will remember, Grandma, Samuel said, tears in his eyes. We will make sure your story lives on. Not my story, Clara corrected gently. Our story. Mine and Owen's. It belongs to both of us and to all of you. You are all part of this story, the next chapters being written every day. She was tired then, so tired. She closed her eyes and thought about Owen, about seeing him again soon. She thought about the girl she had been, terrified and desperate, stepping into a blizzard. She thought about the woman she had become, strong and loved and complete. Her last thought was of warmth. Not just the physical warmth of Owen's fire on that first night, but the warmth of his love that had sustained her for more than 3 decades. The warmth of family and home and a life well lived. The warmth that had started with a cowboy taking in a stranger during a storm and had grown into something that would echo through generations. Clara Northfield Lancaster died peacefully in her sleep that night, surrounded by the family she and Owen had built together. She was buried next to Owen on a hill overlooking the ranch, and the whole territory came to pay their respects to the woman who had come west as a desperate mail-order bride and built a legacy of love. Years later, her great-great-grandchildren would still tell the story. About the blizzard and the cowboy, about the practical marriage that became a great love story, about the partnership that built not just a successful ranch, but a family that spanned generations. They would tell it as a reminder that the best things in life often come from the hardest moments, that taking risks can lead to rewards beyond imagining, and that true love is not found but built, one choice and one day at a time. The ranch still stood, passed down through the generations, each one adding their own chapter to the story while remembering the foundation laid by Owen and Clara. And on cold winter nights, when blizzards howled across the Montana landscape, family members would gather by the fire and remember the night it all began, when a mail-order bride arrived during a storm and a cowboy warmed her by his fire, never knowing he was also warming her heart and beginning a love story that would never truly end.